Hello everyone, Ailuromage the Magic History Cat here. Last time I covered Christian terms and the abilities of the Final Fantasy XIV White Mage, and this time I will be delving into astrology terms for the Final Fantasy XIV Astrologian. As mentioned in previous videos, I will be covering the names of the abilities that mostly stand out, as I don't think I need to discuss self-explanatory abilities like draw or light speed. Additionally, this is going to be part 1, and I am covering ability names and how they relate to astrology. In part 2, I will explore the cards themselves and other interesting aspects surrounding them. So let's get into it. First up is Malefic and Benefic, as these two go together. Malefic is your starting basic damage ability, and Benefic is your starting basic heal. These eventually upgrade as you level and will become Fall Malefic and Benefic 2 by the time you are max level, which are just stronger versions of themselves. In astrology, when using your chart, you initially take into account what are called malefic and benefic planets. Generally speaking, malefic planets such as Mars and Saturn will cause negative effects, while benefic planets such as Jupiter and Venus cause positive effects. There is a lot more to this in terms of how they all relate to each other once you take into consideration the house, sign, distance from other planets, and so on, but basically this is the overall foundation for how planets work. These abilities I think are well named in game and are basic effects for a basic concept. Next is Combust. It is a damage over time attack applied to the target. This one also upgrades with level, and in astrology, when a planet is combust, that's literally what is happening, meaning it has gotten too close to the sun and into its heat. Generally, this weakens the abilities of the planet. The level that it is weakened depends on if it is dignified or debilitated, which relates to its position. In the game, I think this relates well enough as a slow burning damage to the target. Next is Helios. In-game, it is a party-wide basic heal. Helios is a Greek god and the personification of the sun. When you say something is heliocentric, that means it is centered around the sun. Western astrology is based around the heliocentric model of the solar system. This is in contrast to geocentric models, meaning centered around the Earth, and these forms use constellations and stars in order to conduct their charts. As for the game, I suppose if you view the caster as the sun, then they are using a heliocentric healing spell. Maybe? Kinda? I think it's a good name for the ability. Additionally, with that being said, Aspected Benefic and Aspected Helios do the same thing as their base abilities, but add region over time with the trade-off of the heal being slightly less powerful. So the word aspect in astrology relates to the angles the planets make in reference to each other or other specific things when using the charts. This can have effects on the influence planets have or indicate harmony or conflict. So these keep with the theme overall, and they do sound cool. Next is Essential Dignity, an ability that instantly restores HP to the target and restores more health the lower the health of the target is. In astrology, there are what's called dignities and debilities. As the planets move, they can become dignified or debilitated depending on where they are at any given time. It has to do with their sign and which house they move into. A dignified planet has more influence, while a debilitated planet has less. Essential Dignity is basically referring to how this level is measured. Now, traditionally, there are 5 categories to the Essential Dignities, but primarily what you'll hear in modern astrology, and especially in the Western world, are Domicile, Detriment, Exalted, and Fall. These are going to be the most common. A planet is at its strongest when it is in the sign of their domicile that it rules. Basically, it's in the part of the chart that is its home, so the planet has a high concentration of power and influence. The inverse is a planet is at its weakest in its detriment. So to just bring up the ability real quick named Fall Malefic, Fall is attributed to being a negative thing, so applying this as a prefix to Malefic I think was an attempt at making the ability sound stronger without just calling it Malefic 5. I think an easy way to grasp all of this is to imagine yourself in different places. When you go to a store, a park, public transit, your place of work, you have a different level of influence depending where you are, and other people may have less or more influence relative to you depending on where they are. So imagine yourself sitting in your chair, in your home, in your space. You are in your domicile. Compare that to going to a stranger's home you got dragged to as part of a party, and now you're just kind of standing there really awkwardly, and people start staring at you, wondering who you are and why you're there. You are debilitated in this space and in your detriment. As for the ability in game, I think what the connection here is maybe you, the healer, are helping a debilitated party member in your domicile, so you heal them from a weakened state. Maybe that works. Anyway, next is Sinistry. Sinistry in-game creates a bond with the target party member and causes them to be affected by healing spells you use on yourself or other party members. In Astrology, Sinistry is the exploration of the relationship between people. I'm sure at some point everyone has seen zodiac compatibility tests that compare and contrast different signs. However, Sinistry is a far more deep and complex dive into this that takes into account each person's individual birth chart. Everyone has a unique birth chart, and a Sinistry chart is created using the birth charts of two people. This is primarily used for romantic compatibility, so if love is your thing, then this is probably a fun part of astrology for you. As it relates to the game, it's great, and it's funny actually. I've been familiar with astrology for some time, so when I first gained this ability in game all the way back in Heavensward, I would make jokes with my friends about how the tank is now my soulmate when using it, and it was a lot of fun. Perfect name, 10 out of 10. Next is Astrologian. This is a lot of text and a little complicated. It interacts with the card system of the class, and I will get to the cards in a later video. Basically, different effects happen based on how many signs you have read. Astrologians are a specific way to measure planets on the chart, essentially. It's the numeric evaluation of harmony, discord, and power, and it can be rather tedious, time-consuming, and it involves a lot of numbers, and it's all affected by tons of variables. But there are ways to go about doing it if you're really determined. As for the game, it kind of fits. You get a different effect based on the number of signs, so it connects in that way, being based around a numeric value, I think. Collective Unconscious. This ability is a channeled effect that creates a zone of regen and damage reduction for party members in it. Collective Unconscious in astrology is a concept attributed to Carl Jung. The concept explains that among humans there are archetypes or traits that are universally shared. It really does not do this concept justice to try to fit it into a few sentences, but it is a deep exploration of the human mind, psychology, and how aspects of human thought interact and are connected in a collective unconscious way. Now, I have not read enough of Carl Jung's work to comfortably give lessons on it, but I am aware of various points he made regarding this concept, so please feel free to look up his work if this sort of thing interests you. Next are both celestial opposition and celestial intersection, since these two terms are related to each other. Celestial opposition in-game heals you and your party members instantly and applies regen. Celestial intersection heals a target instantly and applies a shield to them. In astrology, opposition and intersection are talking about planetary positions. When planets are in opposition, it means they are 180 degrees directly opposite of each other on the chart. This can mean different things: tension, balance, etc. Again, it all has to do with what planets are involved and where they are. For celestial intersection or conjunction refers to when two planets are very close to each other, ideally of the same sign. It basically amplifies their power and their energies can merge. Once again, lots of variables matter, but that's generally what it means. Overall, these two abilities, I don't think their names really fit their effects, but the names are really cool flavor for the class. Next is Neutral Sect, an ability that increases healing power and applies buffs to various healing spells. spells. Now, mechanically, this was the replacement to diurnal and nocturnal sect because when there were only 2 healing classes at the start of the game, White Mage was the regen healer and Scholar was the shield healer. When Astrologian was added, it had the ability to switch between regen or shield effects on their healing abilities to have better cohesion with the other healer in large parties. Then, major reworks were done to introduce Sage, turning Astrologian into primarily a regen healer, but the actual ability effect is not really fitting for its name. As for the removed sects, diurnal meaning day and nocturnal meaning night, in astrology this is a real thing. Creating your birth chart takes into consideration whether you were born during the day or during the night. There are teams of planets that affect you differently based on what time of day you were born. So when these two were distinct sects in the game, it was such a clever term to diversify the Astrologian to adapt to whichever healer they were co-healing with, literally changing the effects of their abilities. Game balance is game balance, so the changes were made. Next is exaltation. In-game, it is a damage reduction buff that can be used on you or a party member. Exaltation in astrology I briefly brought up when talking about essential dignity. A planet can be exalted depending on its position on the chart, which is generally a good thing, and this is basically when a planet is in a house that it is friendly with. It's like going over to your friend's house to play games or drink and watch movies. As for the game, I think this ability is very well named. Lastly is Macrocosmos and Microcosmos, as they go directly together. So in-game, Macrocosmos deals AoE damage to enemies and then grants its effect to all party members. Once the effect is executed, it changes to Microcosmos and heals the party for a percentage of the damage dealt. There is what's called the microcosm-macrocosm analogy, and this has appeared throughout history and explored in various fields. In relation to astrology, it follows similar principles in that this concept is the examination of similarities between humans, the microcosm, and the greater universe around us, the macrocosm. In that, you can draw similarities or learn about the macrocosm by studying the microcosm. This has been discussed by ancient Greek philosophers, medieval writers, Renaissance scholars, and various religions. There is endless text about this out there, and you can really get lost in it. In any case, astrology uses aspects of this concept as part of itself. The relation between humans and the universe are the cornerstone in how divination in astrology works. As for how it relates to its in-game effect, I don't really have an idea for this, but feel free to share yours. So that's it for part 1, and a fun dive into the ability names and how well they relate to their effect. I want to thank you all for watching, and I hope this was interesting or helpful information. So if you enjoyed this video, consider leaving a like or a comment, and if you want to see part 2 where I will be exploring the cards and other cool things surrounding it, then be sure to subscribe so you don't miss it. Thank you again, and remember to pet a cat today.